Hi, this is Brent Weeks, author of the Lightbringer series. Welcome to the Legendarium.
Cruxer is, we all knew back in high school, we all knew the cool kids.
And in case any of you were wondering, not me or Craig.
No, that was, no, we were definitely on the outside looking in.
Band room and theater room, that's where you found us.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Legendarium podcast. This is episode number 246. Today we are discussing The Blinding Knife again. This is book 2 of the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks, and this is up to the end of book 2. So if you're not caught up with the series to this point, then proceed with caution because we'll be spoiling things liberally. Now, I'd also like to remind you that the Legendarium is available on your favorite podcast player, but if you're looking for older episodes, you can find them grouped by subject at thelegendariumpodcast.com. If you enjoy what we do here, please consider supporting us on Patreon, and of course, tell your friends and leave a review. I'm your host, Craig Hanks, and over there, if she lost all of her colors, it would immediately make her hair a little less cool. It's Stephanie Bruckman.
This is very true.
Yeah. And whether, by the way, your hair came up on our live stream last night.
Oh, really?
Just for your edification. And whether or not he starts turning green and bragging about being a god, I might just shoot him with a cannon anyway. It's Ryan Bruckman.
Okay.
Ryan is hyped, or as the young children say these days, hype. Ryan is hyped to be here.
Very much so.
Yes.
Very much so.
It's clear. It's clear by the way you're bouncing on the couch. You're Tom Cruising on that couch all over the place.
Well, I just found Scientology. What did you expect?
I got an angry email about that one time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We made some crack about Scientology, and sure enough, there was the email. Okay, so we've got some things to discuss. I went through, I did the housekeeping already, so I know I've already talked for a couple minutes, but are you guys ready for a synopsis, and then we can dive into the book?
Yeah.
Okay, because there's a lot to get to with this section of book 2. There's a lot. Anyway, okay. Second half of book 2. Gavin loses green as well as blue. He travels to the Chromaria to get them to declare war on the Color Prince. He's successful, but alienates several of the color representatives in the process and expels the green entirely. His father wanted him to marry the green, but he marries Karis instead. But that's after he gets woken up in startling and rather erotic fashion by some girl who I don't remember, but he's pissed. He pushes her off the balcony to her death. And the real Gavin escapes, and the fake Gavin is going to let him go, but then shoots him in the face instead. Now, Chekhov's corpse has a bruise on his forehead from sitting up so fast in his grave, he cracked his skull on his own coffin. Then there's a big battle. There's the birth of a green god. Kip kind of Mariadocs it with the white Luxon knife, and then it gets hit with a cannonball or something and dies. So they killed the god, but they do lose the battle again. As they're sailing away, Kip outs Andros Guile as a red-white, and they wrestle, and Gavin takes the white dagger in the chest. He and Kip fall into the sea, get picked up by pirates. Kip is thrown back overboard, but then Captain Gunner takes Gavin, who has lost all of his colors now, as a galley slave. Whew. It's a lot that happens in this section.
It's like
In
a
book 2.
fastest synopsis ever of everything that happened.
I know, and I'm sure I missed a few things, and angry
Kid gets
emails.
into the Blackguard, and yeah.
Oh yeah, there's the whole Blackguard thing. Like I said, I skipped over Tia, I skipped over all sorts of stuff, and so yeah, bring on the emails. That's fine. But hopefully we'll talk about some of those things anyway. But where do we want to start? Do we want to start with?
I feel like you have a real itch to start with with something.
I want to talk about Gavin and Dazen because at this point it's like clearly Brent just wanted to get that out of the way, so we might as well also.
Yeah, it's kind of. You remember in that first book when you're like, "Oh, that's the biggest reveal ever. This is so cool, everything there," and then you get to the next book and he's like, "Yep, boom, gone."
I didn't even get any good looks off your guys' faces, giving me any more info.
We've had time to process this, go through to understand what's
well,
happened.
The thing
here.
is, it's so weird. But by the end of the book, I'm like, I've forgotten about it. By the end of the book, I'm looking back going, oh yeah, I guess that happened. But at the time, I think I actually texted you.
Yep. It was one of the, like, there's like 2 or 3 times in this series that I'm expecting messages from you, and that was one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've gone through at least 2 of them.
Was it the Gavin Dazen reveal and then this one?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it's 2 of them.
Yeah,
so.
this one was a pure WTF text.
Yeah, because you spend so, like, we've set it up so much. You make the crack about Chekhov sitting up in his grave and cracking his head, because this is the biggest, like, Chekhov's gun that never gets fired.
Oh my gosh.
In the sense of, we've been expecting him to be the big bad, to be this whole thing for a while now, and now he's gone. He's dead. He's out. And we've answered the question with, was there brain matter? Yeah.
There was, in fact, brain matter.
So you can go, okay, he's
He's dead. Yeah.
He is dead.
You know, that's one thing about this magic system, like with the color stuff, is I keep expecting there to be some reset button or some way out for something like this, but there's not. I mean, I still feel like I don't have a great handle on how Luxon works and all that stuff. I still don't quite understand the magic system, but there's this instance of getting shot in the face, and then the girl that Gavin pushes over the balcony, and he describes in horribly gory detail
That she
about
popped
how
like a grape.
exactly, yeah, that sort of
In
thing.
case anyone else didn't get that visual, she
And
popped like a grape.
And I keep expecting there to be some magical Luxon out, or off switch for this sort of thing. And nope.
Well, I guess Gavin got stabbed in the chest and still managed to be alive. So,
Well, but it's with the white Luxon dagger.
I'm just saying. I mean, there is something there that he can survive that. So,
Right. And I mean, I knew something fishy was going on in the first book when he takes the dagger to the back, right? But it's almost glossed over in the text.
you don't know
it's
whether
like,
he got stabbed or just scraped.
Yeah, it's something like, and then Kip flew through the air and he reached, what's his name? Zymun. He reached Zymun, who we also need to talk about, right after the dagger plunged into Gavin's back. But then it just goes on. And so you're like, wait, did I read that right? Did he mean before? Is that a typo? Anyway, so yeah, he got stabbed, but he got stabbed by magical no blood blade.
I don't know. I guess he could have shot Dazen in the face with magical
White Luxon bullets.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, now we're talking. Oh, we should have saved that for the end for your prediction. White Luxon bullets. The bullets were made of ice. All right, so what else do we have to say about this? Stephanie, how do you feel about this all?
That was a shocking moment because it is. They set him up and you expect so much out of Dazen and where he's getting, and you feel like he's getting so close to escaping and you don't know what's happening. So for him just to be ended in that way, it was shocking. And I think Ryan and I were actually talking last night about how fantastic Brent Weeks is at creating those WTF moments. I have had so many, like, not that I just can't anticipate what's happening in these books, but all of a sudden he just like smacks me across the face and he's like, just kidding, this is the way it's going to be now. And I'm like, what the? And that was one of those moments. And
My question is why? Why the story is structured this way? And this is a real question. I'm not just saying that I don't like this and so it's stupid. No, my question is really why. Is it, I see two major possibilities. I'm sure there are infinite smaller ones, but the first one would be that he created this situation with Gavin and Dazen, and then as he continued writing and outlining for the rest of the series, he says, you know what, that's not as fruitful a direction as I thought it was going to be, and so he just decides to chop that vine, right where it stands. Maybe that's it. The other option would be that it's a George Martin style thing where he's setting up all these characters and he's using some of them to signal to you that nothing is sacred. Hey, this is not the story that you thought you were going to read, and nothing is going to go according to what you thought the plan was going to be, right?
I picked that one.
You picked that one? What do you think, Ryan?
I agree. I remember reading that, having the very similar feeling of like, wait a minute, why did I waste so much time in a first-person perspective of this guy in the prison escaping if you're just going to kill him off here? Like,
right.
I've spent a lot of time with this character.
Totally.
Really good chapters, really exciting stuff. And like, sitting here going, okay. and now you're just going to throw all that out like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter anymore. I was upset. I'm like, this, even if you decided to go a different route, like, figure out a way to incorporate this storyline. Don't just kill it.
Right.
Like, that really frustrated me. But
like in a legit way, you're saying that you think this was a mistake, or that he should have written it differently.
When on first read, yes, I just sat there. I was like, this, you can't. I give a lot of trust to the authors. I really do. That you're going to find a way to justify these decisions you make, especially big decisions like this. I had a hard time wanting to give him the benefit of the doubt that he would be able to pull this one off, to make this make sense and be like, oh yeah, I see why you did that and why that's worthwhile. So I was really frustrated because I think that the whole prison sequence, escaping the prisons, like, I was just waiting and so excited for the day that he was going to break out of the prison, be out there, and the real world was going to have to deal with having 2 prisms again.
Right.
And I was sitting like, this is great. But Brent Weeks, I think, I have questioned multiple times throughout this series, did he outline this whole series out? Did he plan everything out and he's writing his outline? Or is he one of those authors that just writes and hits like, I've written myself into this corner, write myself out here? Like, because this feels like one of those moments where if you haven't outlined it out, you were like, I'm in a corner and I need to make a hard turn. But I will say that I think, having gone further along, that he has outlined this, because I feel like, I'm not going to say whether or not this is justified, but I feel like...
But you feel like it was planned?
I do feel like this is more planned, and this is one of his opportunities to go through as he's writing from, maybe back to front, saying, I want to get to here. He basically put us in a room full of rugs and just pulled one out, and then he's pulled another one, and then basically every time you land, he's just putting you on another rug to pull out from under you at some point in time. So just realize, like, you've still probably got, 5 or 6 rugs to have ripped out from under you.
Boy, we're really just beating that metaphor to death, aren't we?
Sure.
Well, I think it also, in that moment, says something for where Gavin is in his mindset. I mean, he had just killed a girl. He thought he had lost the love of his life. Like, he was going down, and he had every intention of leaving himself down there and letting Days and Gavin go free and letting him return to his life, until he actually sat down and had a conversation with the man and realized how crazy and power hungry and how good, like, how bad he was going to be for their world if he had let him go free.
Right.
And I think he finally hit that moment, because in his mind, he's sitting here thinking he's never had the strength to actually kill his brother, until he realizes how far gone his brother actually is.
And this is a conversation that this kind of actually segues into how I want to talk about Zymun, who we don't see a ton of in this book, but enough that we can kind of talk about him and real Gavin, fake Dazen, in the same way. Gosh, that is going to be confusing until forever.
Well, he's dead now, so we don't have to talk about him anymore.
There's a passage, and I'm just going to look it up. I wrote it down here. Oh, in chapter 102, when Zymun is talking to Liv, and it's when she realizes that she needs to get out, that she never should have been with him in the first place, and now it's like, oh, he's crazy. He's whatever. He says to her, "You're not very smart, are you?" And, he's gone through this whole kind of discourse about something or other. It doesn't really matter, but he decides that she hasn't grokked his plans quickly enough, and so he says, "You're not very smart, are you?" And she thinks to herself, "Not smart enough to avoid you in the first place, clearly." She froze. His charm had been slipping more and more frequently. He was a lizard beneath it.
Mm.
And when I read that, I thought, okay, so I think it sounds like we're talking about common evolution of an abusive relationship. And then the next line is, there was something wrong with him, something thin, an essential shallowness. How had she not noticed before? And when I read that, I realized that we're talking about sociopaths. And have either of you read anything about sociopaths, sociopathy?
Yeah, and psychopathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I can't say that I know a ton about the subject, but read a little bit about it. I read one book a while ago. And from what I understand, the hallmark of a sociopath is it's someone who cannot process emotion or cannot understand others. They can't look outside themselves or something along these lines, right?
Both of them incorporate some level of inability to empathize with another human being.
Right.
Psychopathy and sociopathy both have a varying degree of ability to understand another person. I think it's variations on how they act on that.
Right. Yeah, and I do not know the difference. Hey, who has two thumbs and isn't a psychology professor?
You say isn't a psychopath. You want to go with that one? Should we put that one to the test?
So yeah, I don't understand it necessarily, but it does sound like in the case of both Zymun and Fake Dazen, that's what we're dealing with is somebody who I don't know. What do you think, Stephanie? With Dazen, is it psychopathy? Is it sociopathy? Or is it simply power hunger? Because we do have indications of the way that he used to treat Karis and others.
I think for me, and having read a little bit more, Zymun is the one character in this entire series that actually scares me. That if he was the type of person that if I ever came in contact with, like, he's terrifying. Because he's the type that he's not doing anything other than for his own selfish purposes. There's not an underlying goodness to him.
Or even necessarily badness.
Yeah, but he's just terrifying because you don't know what he's going to do and there's no why. I'm that kind of person. I always like to know why someone's doing something, and he doesn't. He doesn't really have a why for a lot of the stuff he does other than just that power hungry. And I think the thing with Dazen is he was groomed to be the type of person I think he was when he was originally imprisoned. When he finally had that last battle with...
You're talking about Dazen?
Yes, Dazen. When he finally had that last battle, he had been groomed by Andros from the time he was young to become prison, to understand the power that he had as a guile and everything. And I think it was the insanity caused by his 16 years talking to a dead man that got him to that level of craziness that Gavin finally had to shoot him. There was no calmness about him that Zymun has in his insanity.
Okay. On the other hand, I feel like if I were confronted with both of these characters in real life, I would know how to make sense of Dazen. Even if he's crazy, I would at least have something to grasp onto and say, I think I get what he's after.
Mm-hmm.
With Zymun, I mean, I guess, but he hasn't even said like, oh, has he said I'm going to rule the world and I'm going to enslave mankind and stroke my white cat and, lord over all creation? I don't know. It just seems like he is an agent of chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Zymun, I actually want to backtrack a little
Ryan's trying really hard to figure out what he can and can't say at this point.
So I want to backtrack just a little bit on you. We've kind of labeled him as a sociopath, but that's because he seems functioning, and that's not an accurate. He's a psychopath.
Okay.
And I got to make sure I get this right because there's someone who's got a psychology background who's going to be like, no, you guys have got it wrong.
I know. Just we'll have to deal with it.
Let me give you this definition and see if you think it fits better to Zymun or if the other one. Incapable of empathy and forming loving relationships, however, they can pretend to be charming and loving. So those around them can't always detect their lack of empathy. That's a psychopath.
Okay.
A sociopath is capable of empathy and guilt. They're impulsive, hot-tempered, and erratic, but may form attachments to some people or groups. Of those two, where would you put Zymun?
Oh, psychopath.
No, yeah, he's
For
a psychopath.
Definitely there. Dazen, on the other hand, is just straight crazy. I don't think it's...
You don't think it's like some sort of clinical thing?
I think it's ability. You already talked about how he was groomed to be what he is by Andros, and then thrown into a prison, and that lack of being able to interact with anybody else. That I think that's a totally different beast as to necessarily to say his personality is one thing, but his environment has shaped more of who he is in the last 16 years.
Right.
So I wouldn't label him quite the same way. If you let him out and went out to do things, I would label him a psychopath for sure.
Okay.
But Zymun is a terrible, terrible character, and I don't think there's anything about him that you are supposed to like.
Well, do you mean to say he's a terrible character or a terrible person?
He's a terrible person. He's a great character. He's a
scary.
terrible
He
terrible
scares
person.
me.
Yeah.
You should not ever look at Zymun and go, well, I get it.
Have you guys ever dealt with someone? Have you ever come across anyone IRL who acts this way? I'm not sure that I've ever. There are people who I've questioned, like, are you even capable of human emotion? Just kind of flippantly. But I'm not sure if I look back, if I can think of somebody who I would say is that Zymun-y.
Well, Ken is pretty. No.
Yeah.
No, I can't say.
I can't think of.
Because I think most of us would be intelligent enough that if we did come across somebody like that, that we wouldn't really spend a lot of time with that person.
But I wonder, though, because it's, like I said, the way that he's written the relationship between Zymun and Liv feels very familiar to a lot of abusive relationships. And I wonder if it's a little bit confusing because Zymun is a character who's well-positioned. He has a lot of power. He has a lot of influence. And we don't necessarily recognize as easily when something like that is in our own lives. I've never been in a relationship like that before, but I know at least one person who has. I know many people who have, but one very closely. And
I think we as readers are a little. We have just more information. It's easy to look at Zymun and go, he's crazy. What is Liv thinking? Liv doesn't have all of the inside information that we as readers have, and I can see how he could come across as charming. And I know a lot of people that have been in abusive relationships, that's how they start. There's always some sort of level of they are charming. They feel like they're trustworthy. And then as things progress, they realize that it's just a mask that they have on and there's something very deeply wrong. And I think that's where Zymon's at, that he does have some level of charm because he knows he has to. You can't go through life. Yeah, you can't get anywhere if you're not at least pretending to be nice to people.
Right. How do you think I've functioned all these years?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, this is correct.
This feels so familiar. Anyway, yeah, I guess I was just thinking about that. Like it's easy to see it on the page. It's a lot harder to see it in real life. And I wonder, it's so tricky. It's easy to spout off advice and ideas about how to deal with this sort of thing, but kind of what you said, Stephanie, was it's easy for us to see it because we have all this information. We're looking at it from the outside. We're reading this story literally off the page, right? It's harder if you're in that situation to recognize what's going on and to extricate yourself, and that's why it's so important to rely on family and friends for that sort of thing, and why somebody who is an abuser like this in a relationship tries so hard to cut those ties.
Well, Liv's already in the perfect position to be used and abused in this situation. She's
alone.
She's so alone. She feels like a prisoner, even though the color prince keeps telling her that she's not. And they kind of get to that point as she builds her relationship with the color prince. But she's so alone. She's lost her family. She's lost her culture of what she thought she believed in. Her belief system's shaky. So to have anyone come up and show her even a small amount of
appreciation, understanding,
just anything almost, because she knows that she's
or
not in
attention.
love with him. She's using him on a different level,
right,
than what Zymun is. So you can't say that. And no, I'm not going to go there.
You were about to victim blame, weren't you, Stephanie?
Yes, I was. And I don't believe that. That's not the case. And I think it's just an understanding where her mindset is, and who she is and her character and how he was written her, how the two of them have ended up together.
Yeah. Ryan, any more thoughts on this?
I think on the flip side, we've talked a lot about being able to identify and stay away from people, that there's value in also taking an internal look and saying, hey, am I a little Zymun sometimes here?
Right.
And reflecting on that, because there's a good chance at some point in time you've done something that's Zymun-ish. And just taking some time to go like, you know what? Recognize it, move on, be better than that. because that's the difference between like this changing away from that path is better. But yeah, that's that part of the reason I said earlier that you should never look at Zymun and go, yeah, I get it. It's not that there isn't relatable things. It's saying that's not the sort of person you want to be. So if you have that moment, kind of go, oh, why do I understand him here? Maybe I need to just assess something here and decide if that needs to change or not.
Right. Well, speaking of Liv, should we talk a little bit more about her? Because I have one more note.
Yeah.
Here from, so this is a few chapters earlier in chapter 97. This is actually Kip speaking with, what's his fake dad's name? Gavin. Sorry. There's a lot of names.
He's only a little character. He's not
whatever.
that important.
I can't memorize them all, you guys. Kip and Gavin are speaking, and Kip is kind of confused. He says, how could she go with them? They're monsters, literal, real, flesh and Luxon monsters. And Gavin responds by saying, idealists mature badly. If they can't outgrow their idealism, they become hypocrites or blind. Liv has chosen blindness, fixating so much on the Chromaria's flaws that she believes those who oppose us must be paragons. And I really, really like this, where, and this will be a little bit inside baseball, but I'll try to explain it for listeners. But the three of us, we live in Utah. Utah is full of Mormons. Okay, Mormon Church has a very specific culture and belief system, and not everybody who grows up in the church decides to stay in it. And when they leave, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, it is a big, earth-shattering, life-altering event, and it creates. There are a few things. There are a few reasons I want to talk about this, because this is applicable outside. Well outside of Mormonism. You could apply this to just about any belief system or way in which you grow up. If you decide to strike out on your own, it creates a vulnerability like what you were talking about, Stephanie, where suddenly you are desperate for people to help you, to validate you, to help you feel okay with your decision, right? And this is totally normal and totally healthy to be feeling those things, right? But it's also, I wanted to talk about the limits the necessity and the limits of credulity, or I should say of cynicism. It's anti-credulity, right? So if you're a credulous person, you'll just believe whatever anybody tells you. And so a lot of times if you grow up in a really religious situation and then you decide to get out of that later, then you kind of
swing hard to incredulity.
Exactly. You swing way hard the other way and you're like, everything I've ever been taught was a lie. And, it's all it's like I said, big, life-altering, earth-shattering and all this stuff. And I was curious about this, where you guys come down on this idea of credulity versus cynicism, and is there a line somewhere? Is that line just different for everybody? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do think that there is a line that is,
and how is Liv walking it, and is she failing?
I have a lot of friends and my own personal experience of distancing from where you grew up in, things like that. And so the Liv story in this portion is very very personal to me there. But I've watched a lot of people they make a really hard swing out. And I think Liv has started that out the same way. She's not to the point where she hates the Chromaria. Like it's more, I just don't believe that anymore. Like if you want to see her arc, there's those who swing out and go, everything about that is wrong and terrible and it should be destroyed and it should never be a part of it.
But that's what she's telling herself through all this.
She is justifying her being there with the color print somewhat to that, but I don't think she's saying that the Chromaria needs to be destroyed.
Okay.
She doesn't believe all those things anymore, but she's not looking to destroy what existed prior. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Whereas like the Color Prince does, he wants to destroy. He grew up in the Chromaria. It's Koyos. He's one of the White Oaks. He wants to destroy what existed prior. And I think it's very interesting to watch people Liv, Color Prince, anyone in that swing to see if there's ever any swing back or a leveling out at all, like a pendulum on things. And I think Liv is in a place where she she's in a position where she could swing back to a certain degree. I don't know that she would ever go all the way back to the far side of things. Just like anyone with their belief system, some people go back, some people don't, and some people just live in this middle ground. Like, you know what? It can exist on its own. It's not mine anymore.
Right.
Like that's kind of where it is there. There's another quote in the book actually that similar concept from another group's perspective. It's Iron Fist and Gavin. They're talking because Iron Fist has lost his belief in
Orhalum.
and he's a very religious man up to this point, but he's lost his belief. And it says here, when Rue falls, this will become a real war. And once it's a real war and not simply an uprising of a few disgruntled madmen, then the questions begin. At some point, every one of us will have to ask if we're on the right side. If we've already decided that our own side is wrong, that there's no Orhalum, that the Chromaria is simply making the best of a bad situation, then where do men looking for certainty turn? Maybe men shouldn't look for certainty, Gavin said. Shouldn't, doesn't matter. They do. And I think that's...
Ding, ding, ding.
That's beautiful. I've got that highlighted because I loved that concept. Is it doesn't matter if you've grown up your whole life with this certainty, like Liv or anybody here, and this is what it is, and you've now taken away the ability to find certainty by knocking out a pillar underneath what was once your whole structure. You're now looking in every direction for something, and you're going to grab onto something, most likely. And for Liv, it happens to be the exact antithesis of what she came from.
Right, which does make sense when we turn away from, when we turn our back on what we know.
We assume the opposite must be true. Like, a lot of people will be like, "Oh, well, if this isn't the case, then the exact opposite has to be the case," and that's not necessarily true. There is a potential middle ground option or a different angle at which you can see a different point of view, if you will.
That was pretty good.
Thank you.
From a certain point of view. Yeah, Stephanie, you're looking a little pensive.
Well, I think this is also one of those moments that he's giving Liv depth as a character.
He being Brent.
Yes, Brent Weeks is giving her depth. And I know we've talked so much about why Liv is even there. Is she just there so we have someone's point of view from the color prints? And I think this is one of those moments where we realize that she's not. There's a bigger story for her than just being there to create a point of view for the reader. And I think that's the nice thing about her. And her storyline isn't huge from what I've read so far. I have read ahead a little bit, but it's growing, and I like where she's going with it.
Mm-hmm. So that's the thing about epic fantasy, isn't it? Where, based on what I've read so far, yeah, you could take this 5-book series and trim it down to a single book and get the story in there. But the thing about epic fantasy is it really wants to take you along for an entire journey and, let these kind of situations like Liv's play out more organically than they would in a more contrived, shorter novel. Different strokes for different folks.
Well, and I keep forgetting how young a lot of these characters are. I mean, most of these drafters aren't living past 40. I mean, we're talking about a bunch of teenagers as we're talking about
midlife.
That are talking that we're looking at Kip and Liv and Tia. They're halfway through their lives at 15, 16. So I think it's an interesting watching the differences that he's given all of these different characters, these coming of age stories, as they're coming into their adulthoods at 20, making these life altering decisions about how they're going to live their lives, because their lives are very short. They don't have till they're in their 30s to really start making some decisions like we do.
Yeah, like the real adults, like real adults like us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're very mature. We understand life, and we make only good choices.
I have midlife crisis about every 5 years, so I don't know what you're talking about.
5 years? Wow, you are mature. Mine come fast and furious. I'm like 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I go through these cycles.
Yeah.
Oh, who am I? What am I doing here?
I haven't accomplished anything in life.
Okay, so let's move to... Do we want to talk about Kip some more? There was something in the last episode that I mentioned I liked how Kip is allowed to continue to be affected by his childhood, right? And I like that Brent is writing him that way, and that it's not like, oh, I just accessed my second color and now I am perfectly confident and capable and don't think about my mother at all anymore. He continues to deal with his demons. And there was another great passage that kind of summed that up. He says, this is chapter 114. So this is at the very end of the book. We've gone through all that stuff that I mentioned in the synopsis. Settling back onto his bench, Kip pulled the blindfold back up, defeated. He'd almost done it. Almost. The cloak of failure draped easily around his slumped shoulders. That's a great line, by the way. Kip almost again. And I'm like, okay, are we annoyed yet? I'm glad that he's allowed to be a little downtrodden and depressed and self-defeating and all of that stuff. But at a certain point, he's got to come out of it at least a little bit, right? And so I'm literally writing down this note, like, come on, let's pull him out a little bit. Literally the next line. No, that wasn't true. He wasn't that Kip anymore. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't weak. He wasn't a coward. He wasn't rejected. He had gotten into the Blackguard. He had been accepted by the best drafters and fighters in the world. He had been accepted by his father. He had fought a king and whites and a god. He'd made huge mistakes. He'd been stupid and weak and cowardly and rejected. Without him, his father wouldn't have been stabbed. But he also had pulled his father from the waves, had saved his life when no one else could. Kip had donned almost as his spectacles. There was a middle path, a golden mean between the whore's son and the prisms. He wasn't really Kip Godslayer, but he also wasn't the boy who'd knuckled under to Ramir. Not anymore. I am what I do, and I am Breaker.
I love his name. I love the Blackguard giving him that name and what it does to him as a character in that, especially in that sequence there, where it's a place for him, an identity for him to have that is more than the wretch that he came from being, but less than, what Zymun thinks he is. Going back to Zymun a little bit there, but yeah, I adore that portion.
So good. Stephanie, thoughts?
There's so much that happens to Kip that we've really glossed over and haven't talked much about. And I think even though they kind of make it seem like Kip being part of the Blackguard, or at least going through the training, was just his father's way of giving him something to do. I know there's a conversation that Gavin has with Iron Fist that he's not really expecting much from Kip, but he needs Kip to do something. He needs him to learn something so he can use him later on in life. Right. But I loved the relationships and the path that Kip takes to get there. His experiences in the Blackguard training and the friends that he made, his relationship as he builds with Tia. I adore Cruxer. He's one of my my favorite characters. Like that final moment when Kip has not made the Blackguard. He came in 15th. Gavin forces him to sit there and say, no, these are your friends and they're going to have your back still no matter what kind of thing. And then Cruxer just shatters the kid's knee that was in 14th after he cheated to get in. And Kip all of a sudden is now in the Blackguard. I was like, holy cow, this kid who is the straight arrow that just adores and has planned his entire life around this moment of
willing
making
to risk everything.
The Blackguard. He does. They obviously very much could have kicked him out, even though he checked first. He's like,
yeah, it's a great bit of comedy. Training accident. He's like, the testing's over,
right? And then he hits and then he shatters the kid's knee, just so he can claim it's a training accident, because then he won't be expelled from the Blackguard.
Cruxer is. We all knew back in high school. We all knew the cool kids. There were the cool kids club in the club, right? But then there was always one or more, but at least one who was actually cool, and who was actually a decent human being and nice to all the other kids in the school. And, so there's the popular club that everybody loves to hate, but there's always that one who's like, you know what, you deserve to be in the cool kids club. Thanks for being who you are, or whatever.
And in case any of you were wondering, not me or Craig.
No, that was no. We were definitely on the outside looking in.
Band room and theater room. That's where you found us.
You were method acting in high school, and I was tooting a trombone. So, I mean, we kind of founded the Cool Kids Club. If
I
you
heard
think
that
about
you were
it.
doing meth and acting is what that was. So
Well, Davis High. That was the meth hotspot of
Exactly.
Utah.
It was rampant. Anyway, I guess I loved this passage as well. I thought it was great writing. I love the idea of this line, Kip had donned almost as his spectacles, which in the context of the story, of course, means that that's how he is seeing everything. And the way that Brent is writing Kip might be slightly unrealistic. I don't think most of us are this self-aware, but if you ever have a flash of it, this self-awareness, then grab it and hold it as tight as you can. If you can understand that, we all put on spectacles, and what is the color of our spectacles, and how do we view ourselves? Some of us are overconfident and don't understand that we're not the best at everything. Others, most of us, are probably largely like Kip, where we don't understand our actual value and what we've added to the world and our relationships and all that stuff. I feel confident. I feel 100% certain that if anybody tends to feel like Kip almost, that, with 5-minute conversation, I could turn it around, and anybody could, right? And somebody from the outside would be able to say, no, it's clear to me that you've been able to accomplish this and this and this, and look at the amazing things you've done. Like Kip B, that's a good place to strive to get, right? Anyway, all right. Well, there's Kip. Do we want to talk more about the Blackguard stuff and Tia? And I'm not sure there's a ton to talk about at this point.
There's a couple of moments. The girl that unknowingly saved Kip's life.
I'm not sure I remember.
It's the night before the Blackguard final testing, and they had just been out doing their live test or whatever.
And she gets her head blown
And
off.
she steps in front of him as someone shoots a musket at Kip. Not that there's a whole lot to talk about now, but it's something worth remembering that it happened.
Yeah, I think her name's Lucia or something like that.
Yeah, it's Cruxer's
Cruxer's
Girlfriend.
Oh, yeah. That was a heartbreaker, wasn't it?
So, and that all happened the night before all of these kids have to battle for the rest of their life, basically.
Yeah, and it, in a very painful moment when you get to the testing, when they're first testing, and you realize Cruxer, that whole team has been moved down 3 slots.
Yeah.
Was what puts Kip in the position that he's in, because they didn't complete things. They're like,
They didn't
a girl
complete their
got
test,
shot.
yeah.
Like, she died right there. There's a good reason they didn't complete their test. The Blackguard came in and interfered with everything when that happened as well, and yet they still got punished for it. I was like, that is cruel. That is cruel.
I'm kind of wrestling a little bit with that, because you have told me, and everybody has said on the Weeks forums and in our Discord and everything, they've said Brent Weeks will, like you've been saying, pull the rug out from under our characters, and you'll be so frustrated that good things never happen to our characters and all this stuff. And I'm kind of seeing that right now more with the minor characters, or who turns out to be minor characters. Dazen. But what I'm seeing, and maybe this is the color of the glasses that I'm reading the story through, I don't know, but I keep seeing things like Kip doesn't make it into the Blackguard. His dreams are shattered, and it's all because of these cheating scoundrels, and this horrible thing has happened to him. And I thought of you and what you had told me to expect with the story. I'm like, oh man, he's going to have to figure out something else for the rest of his life. And then a page later, Cruxer gets him into the Blackguard. And kind of a similar thing with Gavin. Gavin pushes the girl out the window, accidentally on purpose, whatever, and his life is ruined. He's got to flee the Chromaria, and nothing is going. Oh no, never mind.
The Blackguards lied for him.
Yep, the Blackguards lied for him, and everything is just fine.
My first
now.
thought about that is, when is that coming back to bite him in the butt?
Oh right.
These kids have to be found out that they just lied to everyone.
But it's kind of, at least to the white and maybe some others, it's kind of an open secret, right? Like it's not
They probably all know Gavin actually did kill the girl.
Yeah. Anyway, so I guess I'm just looking at a few instances in this story where I'm like, yeah, terrible things are happening, and then he
Pulls it back out.
pulls him out of the fire. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm a little bit trepidatious for books 3, 4, and 5 to get to what everybody's been talking about. But so far, I'm like, I'm kind of thinking for our 3 or 4 main characters, things seem to be pretty much going the way you would expect them to in a story like this.
They just have to go. They have to pass through the failure first. In the fight, in the try-fail cycle, he does that where they got to go through the fail, but there's usually something. The one thing about that most of the time, what has pulled them out of the fire has been something that they have established prior. For example, it's Gavin and his connection to the Blackguard. They call him Promachos because of their love for him and what they're willing to do for him. So he's built that up there. For Kip, it's the connections that he's made. So I agree 100%. Like that he does. It's like, oh, this terrible thing has happened, but then they get pulled out of the fire. But they get pulled out of the fire because of the work they've done before. It's not just a Deus Ex Machina coming in and being like, all right, we're going to move our characters into the position we need them to be in, type thing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, any more to say on this subject? I don't have anything clearly. We good? What do you guys want to talk about? We got another 5-10 minutes.
There's only one little epic battle at the end of this book.
Oh, you want to talk about that?
That no one's talked about.
Ken's not even here. Who cares?
It only takes up like the last how many chapters of this book.
I will say that is a pattern I'm noticing with Brent Weeks, which is this dude knows how to draw out a battle sequence. Where I remember this from the first Night Angel book, where it was the climax of the book, and I looked down at my little Kindle and it says 60%. I'm like, you got to be kidding me! And I just kept reading, and it was like this 40% of the book was climax, and I was like, nobody can hold on to that sort of climax. Anyway, but he tends to do this, right? It's long battle sequences. The first book ended with the assault on Garrison. And it was a very long sequence. Anyway, all right, what do you want to talk about with this battle? Do you want to talk about Tia? Do you want to talk about Gavin and the new god, Adarat?
Adarat. This is the first time in this sequence where we're starting to get the bigger picture of what the color color prince is trying to do.
Yeah, okay.
He's like, okay, we're bringing back the old gods. We're bringing back this previous existence who control the colors. And if they come back, it's a really bad thing for the Chromaria and drafters, because we learn through the sequence, like, Adarat is the green god. So all the green drafters who are within range of Adarat's influence are useless.
And what is it? They kind of go crazy, or it hyper activates the latent personality traits of green.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
So because green is more wild and like they will go wild and they will stop listening to directions, things like that.
Right.
It's basically a shot of 5-hour energy straight into the
just inject it right into my veins.
Yeah, straight in there.
Well, and I think it says a lot, like looking back on the Blue Bane, and when Gavin destroyed the Blue Bane, and he said that they were just the blue whites were just laying there. They were just waiting. But that's a trait of being blue. It's that calmness, that logic, that thinking through things. Where with the Green Bane, it is just mass chaos. But that's part of the traits of being green, and it's bringing those out on. Like there's a moment where they talk about the Blackguard and how they have to keep those that draft green away,
right?
So that they don't make things
kill everybody
worse.
Else.
Because obviously having someone trained like that and then going crazy would be bad.
And then there's a scene as they're sailing up to the battle. There's a scene where they stop at the beach, and there's this town that's been wiped out, and everybody's either killed the others or run away, or killed the others and run away. And they're talking to this old fisherman. He's out killing whales on the beach. All these herd of beached whales. What do you call a pod, I guess, of whales?
A pod of whales.
And they're chatting with him, and he's like, I don't know what happened. We had this whole city or this whole village, and there's like 5 of us who are left who aren't completely insane, but everybody else just went crazy. They went nuts. And it brings up an interesting question about what it means to be a green drafter and what the magic system means to everybody, and clearly it affects more than just drafters, and I don't know. I don't know what's going on with everybody.
I think,
How has it filtered down to the common folk, I guess?
well, there's also this thing where we learned early in the first book that fear brings out the ability to draft. It's kind of like breaking or snapping in Mistborn, or
Right.
these different concepts. And so if all of a sudden you have this green bane, and you have a bunch of whites show up or whatever, a lot of people in the town might get really afraid and start to be able to draft, and then they're affected by, oh, we've got green drafters here. On top of, if you want to talk about potential bloodlines and things like that, being in different places. This actually reminds me a lot of the Robin Hobb series.
Okay, the Assassin's Apprentice.
Yeah, where the bad guys were basically sucking the souls out of people and turning them into zombies that attacked everyone. Like, that's what I'm envisioning the Bane doing to this village, being near that. So is essentially just, if you have even the smallest bit there, it activates that and turns you into a green zombie, basically.
Sweet. Love it. Green zombies.
Well, and it kind of gives a reason as to why what's happening to Gavin is so important. Because as the Prism, he's supposed to keep all these colors in balance. And as these Banes show up and as he's losing these colors and the ability to use these colors, it's not just that he's not going to be able to do these sacred ceremonies and whatnot, but it's the world going into chaos. He's no longer able to keep things balanced. And as these drafters, they're not able to balance themselves. And that's part of what the big overall problem is the Color Prince wants to give everyone these freedoms where the drafters can choose what they want. Well, that's where the Chimeria stance is that if we don't have a prism to keep the world balanced, we're going to go into chaos. And that's kind of what the bigger picture all is. So you get all these Banes showing up and the entire world is going to end up just like this little village of 5 people.
Which, yeah, I guess we're starting, like you said, Ryan, we're starting to get the big picture of what that all means.
What they're all fighting for.
Right. But I still, I don't feel like I have fully grasped the concept of all of these gods and the idea of Atarat and like I said, how is this affecting? Why is this affecting these common villagers who aren't drafters? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I will say I was right-ish so far, apparently, in my prediction about the idea of the colors being so closely tied to the personality of the god behind them. Right? So yeah. I feel like I'm pretty justified in that, at least so far in the story.
Whether it's, I don't know offhand whether it's connected to the personality of the god or if the god takes on the personality of the color. Like, does that make sense?
Oh, right. Yeah, and that's another thing I don't understand is Atarat. I was like, okay, so Atarat is a god, but then Atarat is just what? The absolute essence of green distilled into the body of a drafter, because who was it? It was somebody we know or somebody we know of who became Atarat. Yeah,
it was the man who, and I really hope I'm not spoiling anything.
It's the father of the green. Of the green that Gavin kind of ejected from the council.
Tysus Malargos.
Malargos.
Yeah.
It's not.
No,
it's her uncle or something. He's related to her, but
it's the one who knows about Gavin's secret.
Her father is the one that, I think it's her father that her mother had killed.
Yes.
That his mother had killed because he knew Gavin's secret, and so she had him killed.
Right.
But I think it's like an uncle or something.
There was no brain matter.
The green god. Or
either way, he wasn't a major player. He wasn't a major character, but he was recognized by Gavin.
Right.
Which is funny because they also have a previous understanding of the old gods was, Atarat was a woman because she was the courtizan of
the god of wildness and sex and
love
and rock
but now
and roll.
This old middle-aged man,
right,
type thing. So it's slightly different.
Right. Well, I can tell you, when I'm a middle-aged man, still sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I'm sure here in the exurbs of Utah, that's what's really called for, I think.
I don't think ibuprofen counts as a drug in that sense.
All right. So we should probably start wrapping up. Any final thoughts on the blinding knife? The Blinding
I
Knife.
was like, maybe the blinding knife itself.
Yeah.
What do you feel that it has now stabbed Gavin?
And it grew into a sword. Suddenly, it's like this whole sword sticking out of his chest.
It's not a dagger. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's about as far as you can get with it.
That's with this thing, I kind of feel like
I freaking love the blade that it turns into.
I don't know anything about it. It's just all I knew is it turned into a sword, and that's why the book is called The Blinding Knife, because it stabs him and then he loses all of his colors, and so now we're going to get yellow banes and orange banes and red banes and all these banes, right? So we know that, and I don't know. I don't really care. Well, okay, so we know that that's why it's the title of the book. We still don't know why the Black Prism is called the Black Prism, but presumably that'll get answered someday. I'm looking forward to it. But here's my prediction. Are you ready for a prediction?
Mm-hmm.
Book 3? Which one is... Yeah, book
Broken
3.
Eye.
The Broken Eye. Somebody's going to break the halo. I think it's going to be Kip.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be a situation where the Chromaria has put the kibosh on breaking the halo out of an abundance of caution, an understandable abundance of caution. You know, bad things can happen. Bad things have happened in the past, and so this is the new regime. No more breaking the halo. We'll kill you first. So then you got the Color Prince, and he's encouraging everybody to break the halo, and we're having a halo breaking party around here, and everybody's going to have a great time. I think there's going to be this is what I want from Star Wars, where light and dark, at some point, we have to understand that they need to come together. There's been this whole thing about bringing balance to the Force and all that, and then Star Wars as a concept or as a story just decided to completely ignore that. But we need to bring balance to the Force. That's what I want out of this, is a truer understanding of what it means to break the halo and the dangers involved, and Kip is going to be our model for that. He's going to break the halo in book 3, and then he's going to have to deal with that, and maybe he'll seek out the Color Prince's army and try to get some coaching through what's happening to me and all this stuff. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, Kip is gonna break. He's the broken eye. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless, dang it, the third eye on the island of Sears. Yeah, hey, I remembered, because it's not Kmart. On Sears Island, maybe she will also pop like a grape at some point, and she'll be the broken eye. I don't know. Okay, any other final thoughts and predictions?
I can't give any predictions, obviously.
Yeah, no, you can't either, Stephanie.
I'm so far in
You're
that it's
reading
hard
so
to
far ahead.
actually predict anything.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to say that I have completed the series. So
yeah,
I only have one book left, so I'm done. I'm almost done with 4.
Nice. Yeah. So speaking of which, the month of October is coming up, and it's going to be a big one for us. Ryan and I will be recording our conversation with Brent about the Odyssey next week, whatever it is. But we're going to be recording that, and we will release that episode the week that what's it called? The Burning White. The Burning White is released. So that'll come out in late October. I think it's scheduled for the 26th or 27th. So look forward to that. That is a situation in which we will ask him. We will talk probably very little about the Burning White and Lightbringer in general. We probably won't have that much opportunity because that's not what the author shelf is about to begin with. And so don't expect a ton of like new insights. It's just a way for you to get to know the author a little bit better through their love of something else. In this case, he has mentioned that he loves the Odyssey. He sent out a tweet at some point where somebody was trying to visualize Gavin, and he said, imagine Odysseus, like in the way that he looks. And so, maybe I'll ask him about that a little bit.
At what point in his journey, Odysseus, at what point in his journey? 'Cause he goes through a lot.
He does. We'll get there. Anyway, so we'll have that episode. But then Ryan and I are planning, I hope I can catch up, but I need to read 3 books in 3 weeks, 3 giant door stoppers in 3 weeks for us to have an episode ready to go. So in the middle of this whole series, I think I've mentioned this before, in the middle of this whole Lightbringer podcast series, we will insert a book 5 spoiler-free review and then continue on with the the episodes that we're making like this, the spoiler-full ones. Sound good? Everybody on board?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Stephanie, don't be too excited about all this.
Yay!
Yay! All right, sounds good. We will see you guys for The Broken Eye, Part 1, coming up in as soon as possible, basically.